Have you ever wondered if stopping people pleasing is selfish? Or if you'll be selfish when you stop people pleasing? Or maybe you're anxious that people will judge you as too self absorbed or self involved. Over many years as a therapist and now as a therapeutic coach, I've helped countless clients shift out of unhelpful people pleasing patterns, and I've done this in my own life as well. I can tell you these concerns are incredibly common, and they can get in the way of us making changes that could truly help with the long-term costs of people pleasing. In this video, you'll learn why we worry about being selfish when we're trying to stop people pleasing, how to handle those fears so they don't get in the way, how to balance caring for yourself and caring for others, what to do about other people's judgments, and a simple tool to help you handle the thoughts and emotions that come up as you work on breaking free from draining patterns. Plus, why stopping people pleasing doesn't actually make you selfish. First off, if you're asking whether stopping people pleasing means you're selfish or will make you selfish, it's likely that there's fear underneath that question. You probably have some anxiety that others will judge you as selfish, or you fear that you'll become selfish, or you have worries that even wanting to stop people pleasing in the first place means that you're selfish. And you don't want any of those things. Those fears have probably kept you from changing the patterns that are sucking the life out of you. So I'm glad you're here. We're going to unpack this from a few different angles and make the case for continuing to take action, to stop neglecting yourself, and to put yourself on equal ground as everyone else, even when these natural worries and feelings show up as you do. In previous videos, I've talked about how I define people pleasing as sidelining your own needs for the sake of someone or something else. I also use other terms for patterns in the same family, like overfunctioning, overachieving, and perfectionism. Basically, any kind of excessive striving fits into the people-pleasing category. Striving isn't inherently bad, but when it's done too much and too often, you end up putting yourself and your well-being last, and you end up with long-term costs like emotional exhaustion, depletion, and a lack of time and energy to do the things that matter most to you. So when you've spent years or even decades people-pleasing or overachieving or striving excessively, any shift toward putting your own needs, wants, and preferences first can feel extreme. When you start setting boundaries with others and even with yourself around your time and energy, even if it's simply so you won't get drained and burnt out, it can leave you feeling like you're being selfish or self-involved. But here's something important to remember. Just because you feel selfish or you think you're being selfish doesn't mean you actually are. Our thoughts or beliefs aren't necessarily reality. Your perception of yourself and your behavior might be skewed right now because of that long history of overgiving. By definition, selfish means being concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself, seeking one's own advantage, pleasure, or well-being without regard for others. If you're watching this, I doubt that applies to you. You've been focused on other people's needs, wants, and well-being for so long that it's become your baseline. So when you start shifting toward a healthier balance, making your own needs, wants, and well-being equal to others, it's going to feel weird and unnatural and maybe even wrong at first. Here's a quick strategy for you. It might sound a little strange, but it's a mindfulness skill that can help if you practice it over time. It helps us not get tangled up with our thoughts so that they don't get in the way of our actions. So first, you notice and name the thought. So it might sound like this. You could say to yourself, I notice I'm having the thought that I'm selfish. And then you can add just, how interesting. That just gives us a little pause to not react from that thought and instead respond mindfully. Then you simply return to what you were doing before that thought showed up. You don't really have to correct the thought or argue against it or try to prove that you aren't selfish. You can simply notice and name it as a thought and keep moving. But if it helps, you can also remind yourself, just because I think I'm selfish doesn't mean I am selfish. Before I go on, I want to remind you to download my free workbook, The People-Pleasing Primer. It will help you spot how your unhelpful people-pleasing patterns show up and is a great next step in recovering from people-pleasing. I'll link that in the description and the pinned comment. I do want to make a case here for why selfish is probably not a label that applies to you. If you're questioning whether stopping people-pleasing means you're selfish or will make you selfish, that's actually a pretty good sign that you're not selfish at your core. Think about this. The very fact that you're worried about being selfish shows that you're considering other people. By definition, selfishness means acting without regard for others, and that probably just doesn't apply to you. My guess is your desire to stop people-pleasing isn't about taking something away from anyone else. It's about recognizing the cost to you. People-pleasing keeps you focused on others' needs and expectations to the point of draining you, wearing you out, and robbing you of the time and energy you need to focus on what matters most to you. That's why you're working on changing it. And here's the paradox. By taking better care of yourself, you actually create the capacity to be there for others in an authentic and sustainable way. You're not disregarding others, you're making sure you have enough of yourself left to truly show up for them. So, given all of that, it's doubtful you'd ever become truly selfish if you stopped people-pleasing. Still, it's worth talking about what change actually looks like in practice. If you've been following my videos in order, you might remember from my second video, Why is People-Pleasing Bad and When It's Not, that some behaviors that look like people-pleasing at first glance are actually helpful. They're aligned with your values, they give you energy, and they support others too, so they benefit everyone involved. Those are the kinds of behaviors we want to hold on to. As you make changes, the goal isn't to eliminate every trace of people-pleasing. It's to keep the helpful patterns while letting go of the ones that drain you. You'll know you're on the right track when you're paying attention to others' needs and your own, instead of swinging to either extreme. One end of the spectrum is focusing only on yourself with no regard for others. The other end is putting others first with no regard for yourself. You already know what it feels like to live at that end. If you swung to the opposite extreme and focused only on yourself, that would probably feel just as out of alignment with your values. That said, I want to be realistic. Sometimes, especially at first, people swing too far in the opposite direction when they start changing these patterns. As you try to reclaim time and energy for yourself, you might experiment with setting boundaries that are a little firmer than they need to be, or you might pull back more than you intended from helping others. That doesn't mean you're selfish, and it doesn't mean it will always be this way. It simply means you're learning to find the balance. And that's the key. Making mistakes is part of the process. Finding balance means experimenting, noticing what's right for you, and adjusting along the way. The important thing is to be patient and compassionate with yourself. If you go too far in one direction or the other, you can always recalibrate. What matters most is freeing yourself from the patterns that cost you the most, patterns that leave you exhausted, resentful, or disconnected from yourself. This is why balance matters so much, and it's what I'm going to talk about next. Most of us don't want to swing to either extreme, completely focused on ourselves or completely focused on other people. What we really want is to stop the bleeding, to stop feeling drained, depleted, and emotionally burnt out. Because when we're in that place, we can't truly be of help to anyone. Think about the oxygen mask analogy. You have to put on your own mask first before you can help your child or anyone else with theirs. Some people hear that and say, yeah, right, I'd definitely put on my child's first. But if you think it through, if you try to put theirs on while they're moving around and you're running out of oxygen, you'd likely pass out before you actually succeed. Then nobody's mask is on and everyone is in trouble. The same is true emotionally. If you're not okay, if you're fried, you can push yourself through for a while, but eventually your ability to show up for others breaks down. And when you're people-pleasing to the point of long-term costs, chances are you're really not okay. That's why balance is the goal. Balance between keeping yourself grounded and well, while also helping others in ways that feel authentic and sustainable. By that I mean helping without exhaustion, without resentment, helping in ways that let you actually feel good about giving. When you no longer feel generous with your time and energy, or you notice resentment creeping in, that's your signal that you're out of balance. So, how do you find balance? It starts with discernment, using the awareness that you've been building about which patterns are helpful people pleasing and which are unhelpful. See video number 2 for that. It also means tuning in to the thoughts and feelings driving your behavior and practicing present moment awareness so you can make the right choices for you in real time. And it helps to know you don't have to quit all people pleasing all at once. Taking it one small step at a time makes balance much easier to reach. I like to think of it as finding the sweet range, not a single sweet spot you have to nail perfectly, but a range somewhere between being completely other-focused and completely self-focused. When you stay within that range, you can give without depletion, care for yourself without guilt, and stop judging yourself as selfish. When you start making these changes, you might also feel anxious about how people will react. Will they be mad at you, think less of you, or even stop liking you? That fear of rejection is very real, and it makes sense you'd be nervous. Many of us with people-pleasing tendencies are especially sensitive about disappointing others. And if we're honest, sometimes other people in our lives don't like the change. If they've benefited from your constant giving, your putting their needs and wants above your own, they may not be thrilled when you start saying no and setting boundaries and taking better care of yourself. It worked well for them when you were always available and your help was always accessible. So losing that can feel uncomfortable for them. Sometimes they may even judge you as selfish, especially if they don't understand why things are changing. That's a tough spot because people pleasers often crave approval, so it can really sting if someone thinks poorly of you for setting a boundary. These feelings and fears make sense, and at the same time, it's important to learn how to let others have their own thoughts and feelings about you. It might be uncomfortable, it might even feel crappy, but we can learn to sit with that discomfort and not let it change what we're doing to make things different for ourselves. You don't have to fix it, and you don't have to change what you're doing just to make them feel better. There's a saying I find to be true: what other people think about you is none of your business. Easy to say, not so easy to believe, but powerful to practice. You might have to be willing to inconvenience people and even disappoint them in order to not abandon yourself. One way to manage this is by communicating openly. You might say to the person, "You may notice I'm setting more boundaries. I've realized I've been drained from doing too much, and I'd appreciate your support while I find a better balance." Or, "You may see me doing more of X and less of Y. It's part of me working on taking care of myself." You can also give yourself time and space before responding to requests so that you can answer thoughtfully instead of reacting out of guilt or obligation. When you respond with intention, you're less likely to damage the relationship and more likely to feel at peace with your choice. And remember, feeling uncomfortable doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It's normal to feel uneasy at first when you set boundaries or say no. That discomfort doesn't mean you made a mistake. It just means you're stretching into new territory. I mentioned the Notice and Name tool earlier, and I'll just expand on that here as a way to help with the fear of becoming selfish or with the fear of being judged or rejected. You can use it for emotions as well as thoughts. So it's still about noticing and naming with some self-compassion added on. Here's how it would work in a people-pleasing scenario with the feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear. When a fear comes up, start by noticing it and naming it. You might say to yourself, "I'm worried that they're going to be mad," or "I'm feeling anxious right now." This matters because when we're unaware of our feelings, we often act from them. For example, you might be afraid of rejection, but not realize it, so you automatically say yes to something you don't want to do, just to keep someone happy. If you're aware of the fear before you respond, you create the space to make a different choice. Noticing and naming, even if just inside our own mind, makes this possible. Then it can help to normalize the feelings for yourself. Something like, "It makes sense that I'm feeling this way. It's normal and perfectly understandable." Then you can add some self-compassion here, like, "This is uncomfortable, but I can handle it, and I can make a choice here that puts my own needs on equal footing with everyone else's." It'll be worth it in the long run because I won't end up exhausted. This kind of self-coaching can give you a way to pause, acknowledge what's happening inside, and then respond thoughtfully rather than reacting out of guilt or fear. As I mentioned, there are 2 videos that would make good companions to this one. So if you haven't watched them already, I'll link them below in the description. And if you want more support in figuring out which patterns are draining you, I've created a workbook called the People Pleasing Primer. It's a great next step, and you can download it using the link in the description. Finally, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever worried about being selfish when you set a boundary or stop other people-pleasing behaviors? Share your experience in the comments. I think you'll find you're not alone. Thanks for watching.